Hey there, welcome to this episode of the Property Profits Real Estate Podcast. Now, chances are you've heard of commercial real estate, but do you really know what commercial real estate is? Now, I know I had my assumptions, but today's guest is going to set me straight. He might even set you straight, because I'm pretty sure we don't know what all of the 6 different commercial asset classes are. And that's what our guest here today, Neil Timmins, is going to be sharing with us. Neil is a very successful real estate entrepreneur. I love your backstory, Neil. We'll make sure we got the bio in the show notes. But Neil's one of those smart guys who got out of school, became a banker. And if I'm not mistaken, Neil, the same year you got into banking, your mom got into real estate as a realtor.
That's exactly
so you're
right.
Both brand new in your new careers. I'm assuming, I could be wrong, that you came out of university into that job. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. And your mom did whatever she did to get her realtor license, which was a hell of a lot less than what you did to get the banking job.
Yes.
And fast forward 1 year later, somehow you're comparing pay stubs and you realized your mom in her first year in her business made twice as much as you did as a banker. Is that correct?
Yeah. And she was a stay-at-home mom for 20 years prior to that.
All right. Yeah. So that brought the realization to your mind that there might be something to this real estate thing. Credit to you. You jumped right in, very, very quickly became a top realtor, real estate team in your area in Iowa. And then you also saw that, hey, being a realtor is good. Being a real estate investor might even be gooder, because there's all sorts of opportunities there. You got into single family homes and flips and this and that, and the other thing. And then most recently, you found out, quite a while ago, but the thing you're focused on most now is commercial real estate. Is that correct, Neil?
You're spot on. That's absolutely correct. It's the evolution, I think, of us in real estate. For me, it was, crawl, walk, run, right? And, from an agent to an investor on the single family side, and then into commercial now for the last 4 or 5 years.
All right. Very cool. Now, what I really want to dive into with you today is the different classes of commercial real estate, because we talked a little bit about this off camera and I wasn't aware. Well, I know of all of them, but I wasn't aware that they're all classified under commercial. So if you don't mind, Neil, can we just kind of go through the different kinds of commercial real estate and maybe just a 30,000 foot perspective, pros and cons of each one? So
absolutely. So we focus on the six major asset classes of commercial real estate. That's the overwhelming bulk of commercial real estate in the country.
Yeah.
So apartments, right? Everybody knows about apartments.
Yeah. Yeah. Commercial residential.
Commercial residential. There you go. Yep. Absolutely. And then mobile home parks or mobile home communities, however you want to refer to it, self-storage units, and retail. So we're all familiar with retail, industrial, and office.
Okay. Well, there you go. So and for whatever reason, it makes sense now that you've said it like that. Yeah, that's all commercial, but I hadn't connected the dots and put those all in commercial real estate. So, all right. If you don't mind, let's go through each one a little bit. Have you got experience with all of them, or have you, or a few of them that you haven't?
Well, we now, as of yesterday, we now either have owned or currently own all of them. We just closed on our first mobile home park yesterday.
Hey, congratulations.
Yes, thank you very much. So yes, we've got ownership interest in all of them, actually. Now that I'm just running through it in my mind. Yes, we own all the asset classes. Yep.
So what I'd love to talk about with you, coming from this unique perspective that you have, is what you like and don't like about each one of those classes.
Perfect.
And if somebody hasn't taken a jump into commercial yet, where you would suggest they get started with. So why don't we start with apartments, because everybody's kind of familiar with those. So
everybody's familiar with that. For people coming out of single family, it's the easiest next bridge to take is into apartments. So from a pros and cons standpoint, the pro is it's an easy next step. It's an easy next leap for somebody.
So how many units would be the minimum for it to be classified as?
Classified as commercial here is 5.
Got it. Okay.
And the pros are, that's one of the big pros. And the next pro is financing is pretty darn simple. It's in comparison to other forms of commercial real estate.
Okay.
And if inflation's on your mind, it's a really good spot to place dollars and cents because it can keep up inflation very well because your leases are typically either month to month or year to year. So you can adjust your rent rates relatively quick. Cons
depending if you're in an area that's got rent controls or not, right?
You're correct about, you're right about that. There's always some nuances in there. Yes.
Yeah.
The downside is tenants, termites, and toilets, right? It's people. That you're dealing with stuff. It's can be management intensive, and depending on your quality of your asset, kind of A, B, or C. A being brand new property, going to attract typically the best tenants. B, kind of the next step down, and C, far more labor intensive, far more greater repairs. It can be daunting, and there's a lot of mom and pops who live in that C class and that B class area, and oftentimes they can represent really good buys when we're buying property.
Very good. All right, perfect. So there's apartments. What would be the next class that we should be?
Let's talk about mobile home parks.
Yeah, you just got one yesterday.
Yeah, just picked one up. Just closed on it yesterday.
Excellent.
Yeah. Mobile home parks. I mean, it's. I'm here in the U.S. It's the U.S.'s last stance at affordable housing. And,
same in Canada, man.
Yeah,
it's no different up here.
Yeah. So that's what it looks like. It's really the last stance at affordable housing. And, the pros are if you can buy it correctly. And what I mean by that is we want to be in the business of leasing land. I don't want to own a trailer. I want to own a park, which just means the land, and I want to lease that land back to somebody else who owns that trailer, and they rent their ground from us on a monthly basis. And from that standpoint, although they're called mobile homes, they're not particularly mobile, right? Yeah. They are very expensive to move. And so the odds have it, somebody's going to stay there. They're going to stay an extended period of time. The cons on it are, depending on your utility structure, from an infrastructure standpoint, that's always the biggest challenge. What's your sewer like? What's your water like? Those are the biggest challenges. Water lines up here in the north. I'm in Iowa. It gets pretty cold here. Not as cold as where you are, but gets pretty cold. Water lines can break.
Yeah.
And water lines, excess water bleeding out, burning oil, if you will. It costs money. So there's some moving pieces there. And you're getting
what's the financing like for mobile homes? Is that
more challenging? Oh, well, great question. Far more challenging. There are a lot of banks who will not touch mobile homes because you're dealing with some of the banks just don't understand it, and they don't want to work to understand it. So you're dealing with a limited banking pool we've gone from two ends of the extreme, by the way. Apartments are the easiest to finance. Mobile homes parts out of all six of these asset classes are the hardest to finance.
Interesting. I didn't know that. Okay. So very, very cool.
You're going to end up with a little more money down on it. Not impossible by any means, just a little more challenging.
Now, have you found, you're just getting into this one, but do you find any challenges with municipalities with mobile home parks as well?
Municipalities can be your friend, and here's why, because most municipalities will not allow new mobile home parks to be developed to go in. Right. So they're your friend in this sense that they block out your competition from coming in. They're going to allow you to operate to exist because odds have it, it's been there for a long time. The one we just bought is just outside the city. So it's in the county. It's been there for nearly 40 years.
So it's kind of grandfathered in.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay, cool. What would you like to talk about next? Let's talk
about self-storage units.
Beautiful. Yep.
Self-storage units. I don't know about up north where you are, but in the US, people have way too much stuff. And so once they
dude, pretty much just assume that everything up here is pretty much exactly the same. Just some of us talk a little funny. That's all.
So you buy a box that you live in, you fill that box up full of stuff, and then you got to go rent a box to fill that thing full up of stuff. And that's what happens. Yeah. People just have a lot of stuff.
I had an acquaintance of mine, his mother had a big house full of crap and 6 storage units for all the other crap that didn't fit in the house. So it's crazy
stuff.
Good business.
Good business. Yeah. And that's the positive of the storage units is that, you're renting a little, 10 by 10 metal box to somebody. And from a management standpoint, it's pretty darn simple. You're in a quasi retail business because you have to lease these things. Sometimes they're month to month. So you're going to end up with more turnover. It's more of a consumer facing retail type business.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got a real estate you've got a business with a real estate play is really what it is. So it's getting your head wrapped around how are we going to manage that piece. For us, we manage it remotely.
Yeah.
We've got one multiple states away. Everything is largely done through online. People can rent everything online and they get a code and then they go in and punch
cameras and stuff that you guys can observe things.
They go in, punch that code in, the gate opens, they go to their unit.
Now, is the one that you guys have, is that like a typical storage unit or is it one in an urban center that's kind of vertical versus, or which kind do you guys have? Great
question. It's typical setting.
Yeah.
Typical setting, come in, just giant metal box after metal box for 6 rows down the line.
All right. Pros and cons.
Yeah. Pro management can be really, really simple there. The con would be you got to be able to buy it right and understand the area. The con historically have been they're very inexpensive to buy, or excuse me, to build. Historically speaking, that's not. We're seeing inflation. We're seeing numbers run up. So historically speaking, your competition can change very quickly,
right?
And impact.
Somebody could build a new one right across the road from you,
and since it's a commoditized business, it's a little tough, right?
Right. Now, big advantage. Now, let me know if this is true. I've interviewed a number of self-storage investors. The number I hear quite regularly is per square foot, you can actually rent a self-storage for about the equivalent of what you would rent an apartment for in the same area. Have you found that to be true?
Yep.
You guys,
absolutely. Totally accurate. Yes.
And no tenants to deal with, no toilets to deal with, no utilities to deal with, just a box with maybe a light bulb if they're lucky.
You're exactly right. Yeah. We don't, water doesn't exist at the property for us. The only way to pay us is by credit card or by ACH online. So you can't pay cash and you're not going to ever see a person.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty sweet. And what are some of the pitfalls?
The pitfalls, really the new construction, your ability from that standpoint, and knowing that you have to buy it also, for your ability to buy it right. I like being able to buy it in an area that there isn't going to be much building activity to come, and it's an area that's highly visible. So your ability to have a sign is your number one marketing asset.
Yeah. So it's location. You're
exactly definitely right when it comes to that.
You mentioned retail, kind of like a little bit on the retail side of things. Okay.
Yep. That's exactly right.
How's the financing for this kind of asset?
More traditional. Traditional bank financing that you would see across. But kind of the rest as we round out everything else is going to look awfully similar to one another. 5-year or 10-year fixed rates, 20 to 25-year amortization schedules. Pretty typical as we round out the next few asset classes.
Perfect. What are we going to talk about next?
Let's talk about industrial.
Let's do that. Yeah, because that's something that I think most of us don't really know very much about. So
industrial is terrific. It's sexy. Yeah. I love it. It's actually unsexy, and that's probably why I love it.
That makes it sexy for it.
In last year, 2021, apartments led in rent growth. Industrial was number 2 on the list out of all other asset classes. We've moved off, from going places to buying things online, right? Okay. And all those things online have to get put in big giant warehouses. Distribution centers have to take place. They're versatile. I've seen warehouses, industrial spaces turned into call centers where there's hundreds of people that just become a cubicle haven, right? Put a little.
So when you're saying industrial, is that kind of what you're thinking of as a warehouse?
Yeah, exactly. And it's a broad category because a whole bunch of things can fit in it. But ideally for us, it's a vanilla giant box warehouse with a very tall ceiling on it.
With a bunch of boxes inside that giant box.
You got it. Yeah.
So it's not so much about in industry building stuff and sparks flying, and
you're exactly right. A couple of examples of properties that we own. One is it's an industrial building, but it's a bakery. The largest grocery store in town operates their bakery out of the building. Another one would be heavy equipment sales and service. They operate in another building that we possess. So what I like about it is there's tremendous versatility inside of a big giant box.
Right. So if one tenant leaves or goes out of business or whatever, it's not that tough to retrofit that property to get somebody else in.
Yep, exactly right. Pros, as a result of that, they often sign very long leases. So 10 years is not uncommon, 15 years and is 20 years in some cases. They can sign very long lease terms. The downside is if you end up with a vacancy, it can take a while to fill a vacancy, depending where we're at in a market cycle, right?
That's a fascinating idea. Hold that thought for a second. Hi there, this is Dave Dubeau, and real estate investors hire me to raise capital the right way. Why? Because most of them are stuck with too small of a portfolio and they don't know how to attract investors and raise money for their deals. So I help them to connect, capture, and close their ideal money partners. Bottom line, when you've got a deal, you're going to have the capital to do it. So go ahead and book a no-cost capital clarity session with me at bookachatwithdave.com. Again, that's bookachatwithdave.com.
Yeah, been there, done that. That's for sure. All right, what comes next for you, Neil?
Let's talk about retail.
Yeah, that one's kind of, depending on who you talk to, kind of scary. What's your take on it?
And it's multifaceted in the sense of there's a lot of things that fall into retail. For example, a single tenant retail building, an example, a Dollar Tree comes to mind. We've got a property, a Dollar Tree in our portfolio.
That sounds like a good one.
They're a credit tenant. We bought it with a fresh 10-year lease on it. So you've got a credit tenant, nationally publicly traded, and then they've got a long lease on that. Terrific piece. But again, the downside of that is if they leave, what do you do with that? There's only so many people who want a 10,000 square foot single tenant retail space. And so for those who shy away from those single tenants, you can end up in a multi-tenant building, right? Say a 10, 12, 15,000 square foot retail space where you have 4, 5, 6 different tenants.
Like a strip mall or something like that.
Strip mall, perfect example. Strip mall where you got your AT&Ts, you got your Subway, your Dairy Queens, places like that who end up in those things. And so depending where you're at, it can be very positive. We tend to look for things that are somewhat, I don't call them recession proof, I call them Amazon proof. So is Amazon going to put us, is Amazon going to put this place out of business? So veterinary clinics come to mind. Some of the
service businesses.
Yeah, service businesses. Jimmy John's a good example. I don't think Amazon's going to come in and send you Jimmy John's. I think Jimmy John's does a pretty good job at that.
Dumb question. What's a Jimmy John's?
Oh, yeah. Well, you don't have it up north.
No, I don't.
Like a Subway.
Okay. Got it. Yeah.
They're probably one of their biggest competitors. Yeah. So a little sandwich shop, someplace that they'll like, right?
Yeah. Now, do you find do you have any of those kind of properties, like the strip mall-y type things, or
good question. We just sold one. I bought one. We held it about 2.5 years. We made improvements on the property, had a tremendous exit of the property. We closed on that, I want to say June or July here of this year. Yeah. So we just went full circle on that.
All right. Very good.
Yeah.
I've lost count. Where are we at? Have we gone through all 6 or
we have office left?
Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Office left. And so office is probably the of all the asset classes, the most beat down asset class that exists right now because of COVID, right? COVID has sent people home. They work from home in their pajamas, right? They don't go to the office anymore. They don't sit around the water cooler today. I think it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. If one's placing a bet in an office, I'm suggesting it should be either with an existing leases in place with really good tenants, or you better have a long-term perspective and you better absolutely buy the thing right. And know that it could take a few years for this industry, if you will, from an asset class standpoint to come back.
I see some people taking office buildings and converting them into apartment buildings.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I think that's terrific, both from you've got an opportunity to reposition that into another asset class that does super well. And at the same time, you're taking square footage out of an asset class. And that ultimately also helps the asset class.
Yeah. I was just recently in Calgary, Alberta, and they got decimated by the oil turn down a couple of years ago, plus the pandemic and the whole thing, and the downtown was just like a ghost town. My goodness. Yeah.
I think what you have seen is employees have had tremendous tremendous power, right? Unemployment's like near zero. And so employees hold all the cards, if you will. They don't want to come back to work in many cases. And you're starting to see, I mean, over the course of the last 60 to 90 days, big tech has laid off tens of thousands of people. Unemployment's starting to creep up. And I think if that continues to play out, employers have a little more power, if you will, and they get more done with people at the office. I think that's the general consensus. And I think you'll see over a period of time, big shock. Over a period of time that people will come back to an office, but it
might be a hybrid. I don't know if it'll ever bounce back to where it was. That's for sure. But
I agree with that.
Yeah. Very, very cool, Neil. Well, thank you very much for kind of unwrapping the 6 different types of commercial real estate asset classes. I really, really appreciate that. I know you've got a lot of information, a lot of resources around this. Yeah. I know you've written a book, not particularly about that, but about hiring people and finding unicorns. So if people want to find out more about you and connect with you, Neil, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. You want to learn how to, great. You got all 6 asset classes. I always suggest everybody narrow it down to one. Find the one that absolutely is best for you. Get focused in it. For me, my comfort level ends up being my backyard of Des Moines, Iowa is my comfort level. And so I learned multiple asset classes to be able to buy those and ultimately get comfortable there. And so I help people find that. And if you want to learn how to, what I call get rich in the 20X niche, because it's not about just buying commercial real estate. It's about buying commercial real estate right. And so, I wrote a little white paper. You can get that on my website, legacyimpactpartners.com/gift, GIFT. That's the best place to get it.
Perfect. I'll make sure we include that in the show notes. Neil, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Dave, it's been a lot of fun. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, everybody, take care. Check out what Neil's got to offer. Check out his podcast as well. Real Grit Podcast. Fantastic show. And thank you very much for tuning in. Take care. Talk to you next time.
Well, hey there. Thanks for tuning into the Property Profits Podcast. If you like this episode, that's great. Please go ahead and subscribe on iTunes. Give us a good review. That'd be awesome. I appreciate that. And if you're looking to attract investors and raise capital for your deals, then I'm going to invite you to get a complimentary copy of my newest book, right back there. There it is. The Money Partner Formula. You can get a PDF version at investorattractionbook.com. Again, investorattractionbook.com. Take care.